Jeremy Hollmann, who is a RARI honorary, and who I first met all the way back in 98, 99 at RARI. And we've been friends ever since. And Marlize Lombard, who I also met, I think, circa 2000, when Marlize was was studying at RARI. So that's, yeah, we're really going back some time now. Dr. Hollmann has made enormous contributions to the study of rock art in the subcontinent. And I should say that he's best known, or should be best known, for his advances that he's made over the years in terms of the ethological and in combination with the anthropological or ethnographic approach to rock art. That is to say, ethology, the study of animal behavior. So you'll know, no doubt, his study of ostriches and ostrich behavior, and that translating into the rock art, and his study of swifts and swift behavior, and the swift therianthropes, the swift people, swift behavior observable in rock art studies. To name just a couple. Of course, there's more. There are more, but the beauty of this approach is that Jeremy is one of the few individuals who's able to do this and see in which ways it dovetails, in which ways it fits with the San customs and beliefs. And so when you're able to do that, when you've got the rock art, you've got the animal behavior, and you've got the way that the San themselves interpret that animal behavior, then you're onto a winner. And that's why Jeremy's work is so fantastic. Speaking of customs and beliefs, he's also just come out with his recent book, the edited book, Customs and Beliefs of the Come. And so it's the second edition, but it's almost a completely different book. So if you haven't got that, you must go out immediately and buy that book. So there you go, Jeremy. There's a plug for you.
Yes, thank you.
Marlize,
I'm the research chair. You can
research chair rather. Sorry, yeah. My apologies. But Prof. Lombard has been at UJ at the Paleo Research Institute for many years now, and has been in recent years making forays into rock art and San beliefs, not least with Dr. Hollmann and their fantastic papers on the desert kites and related items have been really have made big strides in directions that I don't think any of us had anticipated. So sorry, Marlize, you get a slightly shorter intro than Jeremy, but we must get started. So without further ado, Jeremy, I'll let you read out your own title. I don't need to read what's on the screen there. Over to you.
Thank you, Sam. Can I just confirm that everyone can see what's on the screen? It's good. Okay. So first of all, hello everybody, and I see we've got a very big audience here today, and I'm very chuffed about that. We're going to talk today about notes on George Stow's copy of the Mokoma dance, or the Dance of Blood. And this is a set of paintings that George Stow linked to ethnography about the Dance of Blood. The site itself is we've given it a name. We've called it Namahali Shelter, and it's we'll talk about the location and things now. This is the copy, and in her introduction to Stow's copies of rock paintings of the Eastern Cape and Free State, it was Dorothea Blake who reminded us that since their recording, some of the paintings have been, let me just move this here, some of the paintings have been lost or rendered almost invisible due to a range of factors. And here, and this is going to be a constant refrain throughout this talk, we're revisiting one of Stow's copies of paintings not yet relocated. Stow says that he found the site while examining the sources of the Elands River in the Maloti, and the Elands River rises in the Montesources part of the Maloti-Drakensberg, so that's near the headwaters of the Tukela River and so on. Nowadays, there's a dam there called the Fikapatso Dam, and the river is now Namahali River. And Stow describes the area as very difficult of access. Let me just close this. Consumer survey. He describes it as very difficult of access, and it certainly is. And we'll talk more about trying to find it at the end of the talk. So this is probably why Dorothea Blake could not relocate it. We don't really know how she tried to find it, whether she actually did field work or she made inquiries or whatever. But what makes this copy so fascinating, especially to us, to Marlize and I, is first of all that Stow argued that these paintings depict a myth associated, that's what he calls it, a myth, associated with the performance of the Mokoma dance, probably Mokoma dance, that was most wonderfully and clearly depicted. This is what he says in his book, Native Races of South Africa. And our interest, Marlize and my interest, are primarily in the social context of these paintings of board stones and their associations with women and men, dance and trance performance. And this is a thing that is an ongoing project, and this is one of our first offerings. Right, so let's go on to the field sketch. The field sketches that Stow made and which are now in the Ezekiel Museum. At the top we have two clusters of images, and then below we've got two others, and these are copies that Stow says he made of the paintings, and we're going to see later on, we're going to see that he did his usual thing, which is of putting images from different places on one piece of paper, and that's just what he did, and we'll go into that in more detail. First of all, and please don't try and read this. This is just what Stow wrote on page 119 of the book when he's introducing this painting. So he calls it the Mokoma Dance of Blood, and he cites Arbousset, saying that Mokoma signifies blood from the nose, and it's in the context of a performance. It's a dance that is sanctioned and prescribed, if you like, by the deity Kagan or Kang, and that in times of famine, war, scarcity, or sickness, this dance was to be continued through the whole night in his honor. Orpen says that Kagan gave them the song of this dance. So they didn't make it up themselves, they didn't develop it. Kagan gave it to them. He told them to dance it. And the circular dance of men and women following each other and just dance at night. So this has always been, and Arbousset says pretty much the same thing. It's interesting here, but the dance, as he says, on this account, the dance was called Mokoma, or Dance of Blood, when a man thus falls in the middle of a ball, which is a rather archaic rendering of dance. Women gather around him and put 2 bits of reed on his back. And this is what we've always, and rightly so, I think, linked to the Kalahari San dances, the trance dance, as it's called sometimes, or the medicine dance, or the healing dance, and that this has been an absolute foundation in the literature. So it's interesting to see what Stow makes of this. This is really his interpretation as he's written it, and I just want to see here So what he takes out of it is that the women, at the top right, we have women full of life, dancing, engaged in performing the mochoma. So he says that, and he turns it, it's a narrative really. So this is on the top right hand corner, you've got the dance going on. Then, and what he also says is that this was quite erotic, sexually provocative, and that as a result, the men became aroused. I'm inferring this, but this is what he's implying, because he then says that there are two delinquent bushmen who are being dragged away for their inappropriate behavior, and he also calls them sinners, and that then at the bottom their arms have been pinioned by digging sticks, and that they are being thrashed by Kagan. So this is Stow's interpretation of the ethnography. We of course think that there's much more to it, and for Stow, the importance of the images was, and again, this is rather like, let's say, the ostriches, the blue ostriches, which were important to him because they did demonstrate the hunting, the use of hunting disguises. So these are important to Stow because it unmistakably proves a certain amount of religious belief connected with some of their dances. So he's getting warm there. And that in the painting here described, we are furnished with a positive representation of their fancied deities. So this is why it was such an important image for him. Then we come to the point of the conflation. Let me just get to that. And here I've just got a quote there from Dorothea in the Stow and Blake 1930. And explaining that Stow never attempted to copy the whole painted surface of any cave or shelter. He chose a subject here and there, and unless the figures copied formed a group picture on the rock, he did not try to reproduce the actual distance between them on paper. So that was his modus operandi, and this is exactly what's happened here. And you can see that, first of all, on the left, how it is in the copy. And then what we've done here is that we've drawn them apart by circling them, and we'll talk about more exactly where these images are in relation to each other. But the important thing here is to realize that this is not one single composition. And it's also important to say that Stow is not implying that was the case. Right, so we go on to the next. So now we're going to quickly go through these 1, 2, 3 groups. Group A, we have here as just a black and white version. We've got figures bending forward from the waist in group B and C. Backs are hollowed, arms are held back, buttocks protruding, breasts dangling. These, I think it's pretty, it's a pretty good and safe assumption to argue that these are dances. And as Stow says, they're depicted in energetic dance postures full of life. And I mentioned earlier this sexual or erotic element, and Stow says their actions of the dancing women plainly suggested the result which would naturally follow from an indulgence in such a questionable pastime. So there we get, okay, Stow's point of view and his background, but I think that he's got something there, that, and we know that from the Kalahari ethnography, we do know that there is this element to things. Okay, and of course, what's interesting to us as rock art researchers and people who are interested in rock art is that it's women in this, what is actually quite a distinctive posture that is known in the literature as the bending forward, arms back, and is very closely associated with trance states and dancing and trance states, which essentially go together for Bushmen. Right. Then Group B. Let's go on to Group B. They, the cluster of 5 figures, and they're at the top left of in the original copy. And Stow says that they're near at hand to the first grouping. We don't know how close, but they must be close enough for him to have sort of clustered them like that. And this one, I think, is so I've gone a blank, but I think this one is on top of all. It's painted above the dancing woman, but it's not really germane to the argument. So what we're looking at here, and you can see the field sketches below, and then how they compare to the copy itself. We have flanking figures on either side, which are therianthropes. The one has got a penis with a detriment or infibulation, and they're both holding these what Stow identifies as digging sticks, but we're not sure if that's really what they are. We think they're more like clubs, because we point to where the board stone is being mounted, and it's pretty much at the end. And we know from other paintings, at least, that the board stone's normally mounted about a third from the digging end of the stick. So it looks different. And this detail, the positioning of the stone, is consistently depicted throughout. And this is the first instance where we can say, okay, that would be great if we could actually look at the original and decide what's going on there. Okay, in the middle, we've got a cluster of 3 figures, and they are also very unusual and interesting. There's a figure, therianthropic, facing left with a tail, and it's carrying someone on their back. And then the therianthrope's got its arms behind its back, and then it looks like it's either holding 2 lines, or the arm turns into 2 lines, which go to the back of a neck of a figure that is lying supine. And we are going to talk about that in a little bit more detail now. But first, figure C, which is definitely, figure C is some feet removed, as Stow says, from the other 2 clusters. And his recreation here shows a group of 3 figures with similar characteristics to the therianthropes in the second grouping. They are not, the figures on either side are about the same size, and they face towards each other, and they also have their tails. The figure in the middle, we only see the upper torso. So again, we don't know if that is how the image was represented or shown, supposed to be shown, or whether there's been some fading, some obscurance of the paintings. That's another thing to check. They all have long tapering ears, and they look to us like they're antelope ears. And they're all 3 of them carrying the batons. And the flanking figures hold them in an unusual manner. They are clamping them somehow behind their backs with their backwards bent upper arms. And we saw earlier that Stow describes them as being pinioned. And his recreation, his narrative about these images is that the central figure is Kagan. Kagan is holding the penis of the figure to the right, according to Stow, wanting to sort of inflict pain and discomfort, and then he's administering a sound thrashing to this figure, while the one on the left has been pinioned. Well, they've both been pinioned by the digging sticks so that they can't move. So that is, given the ethnography that we have now, we're coming up with a rather different story here than that rather imaginative reading, I would say. And again, to confirm these details, we'll have to, we would need to see the paintings. Right, so women bending forward and dancing is not common in the rock art. And their linkage here to the Mochoma is borne out in the ethnography, because, for example, Orpen reports Pring saying that the Mochoma is a circular dance of men and women. following each other. And so by implication, women did participate in the medicine dance, and possibly in exactly the same way as the men did. That's one way we can interpret them saying that it's a circular dance of men and women. I noted that these are unusual, but we have here a very good example from Clanwilliam in the Western Cape, a site called Syferkop. Another female figure, because she's got breasts, she's bending forward, and she's hybrid. She's human, animal, and holding the stick, which often it's an accessory that's often shown in the rock art and by dancers and by figures that we identify as shaman or gregha or ritual specialists, whatever term we use. The other trope that we're identifying from this Stow copy is the idea of fighting. Let's just go back. We saw, we'll come back to that copy as well. But fighting is another trope in the rock art, and we find that all over the country. And they no doubt have a narrative component. And John Parkington, we've just seen your and co-author paper about Veg and Vlug, and that's of course a very good example. And I know that you're tying it to a very particular narrative component. And of course, you know, they're easy to recognize, but they are not as easily understood. And we would say that depictions of fights often, or perhaps always, have elements that are conceptual and metaphoric, narrative and metaphoric, as we know from 19th and 20th century ethnographies and from examples of Southern African art, like these paintings here at Bushbeck Shelter. You can see figures A and B are, the one on the left is very clearly brandishing a stick with a board stone on it. Note the position. It's also rather club-like rather than a digging stick weight-like. So there are precedents elsewhere for this kind of imagery. Then we can take it further. The trope is also showing two other motifs or themes that we see in the art a lot: death. And I would argue that here, if we look at look in the circled area A, the figure there, the supine figure, is dead. And of course, we know that dead has a spectrum of meanings, from being physically dead and decomposing to dying in trance and coming back to life, although these are regarded as one and the same thing. Then we have the motif of carrying, and this is what's so fascinating about this copy, is how densely packed it is with these images, and in such a sort of fresh and original way. I mean, all paintings are unique, but this is really something quite wow. And so the carrying, the death, okay, we know death has been explained and discussed quite a lot. The carrying is definitely not as common, and but it does happen, and it is mentioned in the ethnography. Carrying can refer to the concrete physical support offered at a dance in which experienced healers carry the students. They use that word, carry, or should I say the Jutla equivalent. Carrying can also signify the general effects of a healer's work, and this is the work of Richard Katz. Powerful healers talk about how their efforts are carrying the camp, or keeping the camp healthy. So again, is this narrative and conceptual aspects to carrying. It's something that the Kalahari shamans actually do at dancing, but carrying is also metaphoric when they talk about supporting and protecting people. So just back to the death depiction there. And what we see coming from the back of the neck there are two lines. And we think that this could be showing the emergence of the thinking strings described by some of the narrators, and that Carolyn Thorpe has been working on. And we think that this image fits in well with what Carolyn's been saying, and that instead of seeing this or trying to interpret this as a thread of light along which beings, shamans are traveling, that this is perhaps better explained as something that's coming out of a powerful spot on the human anatomy that in the ethnography is I think only associated with the expulsion of sickness. But there does seem to be a little bit of a moot point, because Megan Beasler, in her Women Like Meat, she describes that Ngao spot, which is what it's called. She describes it as a potent Ngum spot, which might imply that it's not just for the expulsion of sickness. And if the painting is anything to go by, it's these thinking strings are being linked from the dead figure to the therianthrope. And there are many ways that, very interpretive scenarios that we could build up around that. But I think that's a story for another day, or for somebody else to look at. We're just noting that this is all the information that's in these paintings. So then we've spoken already about the being pinioned by a digging stick, and maybe just an interesting thing to comment here on the field copies, how the stones are drawn. You note that the stone, okay, well here they're drawn realistically, not realistically, sorry, that's the wrong term. They are drawn to show that the stick is going through a hole. So we see the weighted stick as a whole thing, whereas in the previous tracings, the outline of the stick was visible through the hole. That's just interesting to note how it's changed. And then again here, this most unusual depiction that Stow identifies as a figure holding a penis. You notice that the penis isn't really at the right place. I don't know if we should be too pernickety about that, but it's not really at the junction of the legs. It's not really in the groin, is it? And that's another thing we'll have to check out. And then what are those two sort of more relatively horizontal ellipses? Is that the scrotum? Are they testicles, or are those Kagan's fingers curling around? They're a bit big and a bit distorted. And again, would we be able to see that kind of detail if we were at the site? Then the same thing with the digging sticks. We speak about normally we see them in the rock art, pretty uninformative. We normally see rock paintings of women holding or carrying sticks with Stowe's bones mounted on them. And in the past, certainly earlier writers, Pat Vinnicum and so on, have interpreted these as showing the role of women as gatherers of vegetable foods, and that's basically it. And then the men exhibit these other behaviors, altered state of consciousness, dancing, and so on. But here, every now and then, we get very informative paintings like this one from Ladybrand in the Free State, where we have images of women with weighted digging sticks dancing. And we point out figure 9b, where the figure is holding up, brandishing the digging stick. And I think we could probably agree, sorry, let's just talk a little bit more about the painting as a whole. Figures arranged in a row in a procession that's often indicative of dancing or of going. We have figure 9a. You can see there's a figure that's superimposed on an earlant. So we have there another very common, very central motif in the rock art of the Maloti-Drakensberg and areas, which is another indication of potency. And then down figure 9c, we suggest is also possibly therianthropic. It doesn't sort of fit, strictly fit a human body scheme. So this is really what we have put together, linked from Stow's copy to other rock paintings in South Africa and not far in the Maloti-Drakensberg, and then also a little bit further afield, as you know, the therianthrope from the Western Cape. So we know that there's something more going on now with the digging sticks. It's our argument is supported by repetition of the motif and the pattern across sites. We have more of these images up our sleeve to continue this argument and develop it. So I just want to end this talk by going back to the original copy by Stow, the original copy, and pointing out, I'm calling it finding Namahali Shelter a long, hard look. Let's have a long, hard look at this issue about copies and being able to find them. So we would love to find this place, and we do intend to look for it. We've been in touch with some experienced Drakensberg hikers who know the area, and we are hoping after the winter, we're hoping to go there and to explore. We're not expecting it to be easy. Stow warns us that it's very difficult of access, and on this field copy that you're looking at now is written in the top left-hand corner. It's in a deep, precipitous ravine between the spurs of the Drakensberg, one of the sources of the Elands River. So these are not really very detailed directions in what is indeed very rough terrain. And we mentioned already that Dorothea tried, but didn't succeed. And so the question arises, we have to ask, should one be skeptical? Should one be doubtful about whether these images actually exist outside of Stow's mind? And it has been suggested in the past by Lewis Williams and Thomas Dowson, their publication on the so-called blue ostriches of Stow, which, just to fill you in case you don't know about it, it's from another part of the Lesotho Maloti-Drakensberg, more in the south, and it shows purports to show a hunter with an ostrich disguise and in amongst a herd of ostrich. And Stow writes about that, how difficult it is to get to the site, and how in the end they needed to use ropes and crowbars to get there, which I don't know if anybody has had to use ropes and crowbars to get to a site, but I suppose it could always be a first time. But people have looked for that, and nobody's been able to find it. But to us, coming back to this Stow copy we're talking about today, we think that the images embody well-known motifs, and they do have correlates in known sound beliefs and practices. And even the expressions of tropes that are new to us, new ways of showing these metaphors of fighting and carrying, they do fit in with the overall ethnography. So by presenting this paper, and by having written the paper and sent it through the review process, we recognize and we accept them as genuine in this regard. They are echt in that respect. If the site is found, we know, of course, that it won't be the same as Stow's copy, because we already know we're looking for 3 clusters of images. And of course, we don't know about the degree of preservation, so we don't know what we're going to see. If we find it, we'll see the rock art as it is with our own eyes, or not, though, if the paintings have not perhaps been obliterated in the meantime. Not finding them isn't conclusive of anything. The often repeated comment in archaeology, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. So ultimately, and in conclusion, to say that the soundness of our reasoning and analysis is ultimately conditional on locating, recording, and studying the original images on the rock surface and their situation on the rock surface. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
sorry, I finished
Jeremy.
a bit early.
Yeah, no, fantastic. You had 8 minutes left to go, so that's great. We can have a longer discussion, perhaps. Might I just start off by saying, well, firstly, thank you, and secondly, sorry, in what part of the world is the river that he's referring to? Does the Elands River flow into the is it Free State or is it Eastern Cape?
Yes, sorry, we should have put a map here. It is Free State. It is called Vitsishoek.
Vitsishoek,
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's all the way, yeah.
Yes, it's right
all the way
up
around
there.
on the top end.
Yeah, Montesauce's.
Montesauce, yes. Sorry, you did say you did mention that.
Yeah.
Yep, that's very tough.
Yeah.
That's really
I don't
tough
really know
hiking.
that area at all.
Sure. But it's it's quite hectic, steep. Yes, I absolutely have a similar experience in 2009 and 10. I was working with Lewis Williams prior on what then was later to become Deciphering Ancient Minds, and it started off as a Stow reconnaissance and site finding mission for 2 years, going up and down, mostly in the Free State and Northeastern Cape, around sort of Zastron, Rouville area, those sort of classic Stow regions. And I found that more often than not, his copies were true to form, and obviously you go into it knowing that he brought images from that end of the shelter and from that end of the shelter and put them all together on, because he didn't necessarily always have reams and reams of cartridge paper, and that he didn't get too much wrong. All that said, there are these issues. So as you say, ground truthing them is paramount.
Yes, I mean, this is what we do in our research. We go back to primary sources. So, it was quite bold thing for us to do here, to sort of kick off with the copy. And then, as I say, we felt that the motifs that we were picking up, seeing in the art, were in a way sort of naively copied by Stow. He didn't recognize them as, this is bending forward, this is trance, and so on and so on. He was just, he recognized, obviously had a very good eye, having done all of this work. He recognized something interesting and unusual when he saw it. And you just contrast his sort of visual accuracy with his story, which is really quite simplistic and not very convincing.
Yes, this so-called pinioning with the sticks behind, we now see fairly often, and it's ordinary. I don't know if you'd agree, but for me, it's very often associated with later paintings, or paintings that you'd find superimposed on top of perhaps more traditional stuff, monochrome on top of shaded or more polychrome things, later things. I would hesitate before saying that they were all historical, but we've often spoken about the arms back posture and whether it has any the likelihood that it must have some sort of physiological effect on the body, that when you do that, it does actually do something to you physiologically, perhaps affecting the spine or blood flow. And when you put your arms back, it actually does something to you. It's not just a posture for the hell of it. And that and the same with the arms out like that. And so we've got those images where the stick going through the elbows around the back, holding you in that extreme position to sort of force the issue. And then the other one with the arms out, the stick across the back, across the shoulders, so you're holding your stick across your shoulders like that, which is really common in the 19th century ones in Underberg area.
Of course,
so I found that really interesting.
Shepherds doing often nowadays. You often see a shepherd sort of standing and surveying the flock, and it's sort of whether that's the same thing or not, you know.
But these ones are like this, but people bending forward, bleeding from the nose, with the stick like that, and they're bleeding from the nose and everything.
Okay, that's a sort of bingo concept.
A bingo
context.
moment.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could talk about this forever, but let's open it up to everybody else. Sorry.
Yes.
Marlize, we haven't heard from you yet. Have you got any?
Not really. First, thank you, Jeremy, for doing the hard work here, hard lifting here. I think for me it was really interesting having read Stow's text on the dance previously, but never consciously reconciling it with the image about which the text was written. And so for me, it was important to reconcile that text with the actual image that he saw and that he and Orpen then started to write about. And I think that's where this started for me. Of course, you guys, or some of you may know that I've always had an interest in board stones since my honours years. Ben said I could attend the class, but I'm not allowed to say anything as an honours student, as the only honours student sitting in the rock art class. So for me, reconciling the text with the actual images that he sketched was an important step of thinking about board stones and how we think about them and their roles in society and as part of material culture. And I think you would know, because many, many moons ago, together with Bronwyn even, you started your work trying to reconcile archaeology with rock art. And when we find things such as board stones, I think it does open the opportunity for us to start thinking about these things, not separately, but as things that could tell similar stories.
Yes, you know, in a way, just to come in there, that in a way you can now never look at a board stone depiction or depiction of a digging stick in the same way. Because if it's revealed in some paintings, shown in some paintings, then what about all the others?
Absolutely. I mean, if to go to the, I think, logical end of that particular spectrum, if it's painted at all, it's got some religious connotation, because we know that none of these things is narrative unless that narrative be a narrative of something ontologically supernatural, etc., etc. And they're not diary entries. It's not a menu of animals they like to eat, etc., etc. You know, we had a nice dance last night. Let me just quickly make a record of it. Even if it's that nothing. This is all nonsense. And so we're preaching to the choir in that respect.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, because I think two rock artists just reviewed a paper of mine on a stone that was found with a burial. So I'm still
My eyes.
struggling for bringing the disciplines together and people thinking along these lines. So I'm not sure about the choir yet, but perhaps one day we'll get there, because these stones have been found in, I know of at least, I think it's now 25 burials dating between 7,000 years ago and 300 years ago. So they are regularly used as burial goods as well, that feed into this kind of thinking, I think.
Oh, absolutely. That's 100% what I meant. That they're not being depicted for mundane as mundane objects in daily life. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And this is why the rock art, being archaeology in and of itself, is so important, that we integrate it very, very carefully. I don't want to go on for too long, but we do have a little bit of time still to go. If folks would like to chime in with their comments and questions for the presenters.
So I agree with you. I don't think these are digging sticks. And it's quite a conundrum here, because you don't even know if that's pigment. And until you actually relocate the site, it's very difficult to determine what those might be. Oh, don't take that away. I also agree with you about the penis. I don't think that's a penis. I think that is something the man is holding in his hand, and that's just making it look like it belongs next to the figure next to him. But this is a very interesting case, and it will be fantastic if you can relocate the site to bring more, because it also is dependent on where the images or the paintings occur in the shelter. So go back to that slide with all of them. Yeah, so that's those bottom group 3. I think that is a stick with something else that person is holding. I don't think that is a penis. And I also don't think those are digging sticks. And I very much like and emphasize what Sam said about the embodied experience of dances, perhaps altered states, but it's a material experience, and I think we forget that. So these types of things could also be a manifestation of that, because it is often seen in the rock paintings where you have the actual physicality of the experience.
This sort of reality versus non-real. So much is going to be revealed when the site is relocated. So I agree with you there, Dawn, that there's a lot that we just can't know. But I kind of quite like this. I would hesitate to say speculation, but prediction in advance, that you have, in group 2 there, the recumbent figure with the lines coming out of the now spot at the back of the neck. I would be inclined to go in the direction perhaps of exploring the notion of that this is sickness, because for me, these guys with very skinny bodies and knobbly knees and claws are very often associated with spirits of the dead. So you've got sickness, you've got the now spot on the back of the neck, and you've got spirits of the dead happening, and all of that going on. So I think there are a number of avenues that one might go in, and then we could argue the toss. See what I mean?
But yes, as he said, we are doing our best to relocate the spot. But we thought it may be a good exercise to just present it with its text and then with our interpretations of what's going on there. And it also inspired us to look further and closer to some of the other panels that are well known but never identified with the stones or with this kind of baton-like object in clear therianthropic and or dancing situations.
And it certainly is unusual, this image, which is one of the reasons why Stow selected it, because that's what he used to do. He didn't just copy things that were the same as the last shelter, the same as the last shelter. He was always on the lookout for something different.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anyone had anything to say about the methodology or the approach we took, or opinions or ideas about the status of the paintings. Are the originals there? Is it a wild goose chase?
Thank you so much. And one thing I want to say, okay, you will never know, because as you say, if you don't find these, you don't know if they are just lost, just faded. But I still think the interpretation, Stow had seen so much. I mean, he was working off stuff that he knew. And I still think it's a very important piece of work that you've done, even if they are not real paintings.
Mm.
And then one more thing, I don't know if you said, Jeremy and Marlize, but did you tell everyone that it's published and it's out there, and that I think you probably have it on your ResearchGates profile, a very brilliant paper if people want to have a little bit more detail. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Gilray.
Yes, I was just assuming everybody knew, but of course that's not a good assumption. This has just come out in Southern African Humanities, so you'll find it there. Yeah,
it's a really, I hadn't seen it yet, but I had picked up from what you were saying now that it is out. It's a fascinating, it's a very bold approach. You was asking, if anyone had comments about the way you've approached it, having not been to the site and then publishing on the site. But you're publishing on the Stow copy. You're not publishing on the site. So
I guess,
presumably you guys have been suitably circumspect and said that, this is not necessarily for sure. I think the problem comes when when you have publications on things like the Stow copies or any other copy where people sort of say this is a facsimile, and we know that it just isn't like that. But so I was saying just now, looking at all of these Stow sites that I went to and refound some really quite exciting discoveries. The general impression of what he copied was okay most of the time, and then in the details, quite often, he got wrong because, as you say, he didn't know necessarily what he was looking for. He hadn't been taught how to trace by Paul Den Hut, or he didn't necessarily know what he was looking for. So when we trace something, copy something, photograph something, we go in with a mind not full of necessarily preconceptions, but with a prepared mind. As to what to look out for. All of those things all at once.
And of course you mentioned the fact, photography. He wasn't able to do that for whatever reasons. So he's not able to. He doesn't back his stuff up with photographs, which is just that's just how it is. But nowadays, of course, we would also have that and say, don't take my tracing's word for it. Here are the pics, and here are the coordinates.
Well, yes. If nobody else has any further questions, it just remains for me to thank you both very, very much for for this contribution and your ongoing contributions as well, and for the marvelous presentation, Jeremy. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, and watch the space for more about board stones.
Excellent.